everyone, it's Courtney and Jeremy with Reckless Cards, and we are here with Dustin, Sports Card Dad, for a part 2 because Dustin and I kind of took over the last episode and did nothing but talk about Stranger Things. And Jeremy informed me afterwards that he had a bazillion other questions that he wanted to ask Dustin, and I did not give him a moment to speak.
So in fairness, I was actually taking notes because I thought I had like very legitimate and fun questions that I was sincerely curious about. However, Courtney, your daughter decided to come down in the middle of the night, vomiting all over God's green earth and just disrupt the whole thing.
Yes.
Disrupted the whole thing. Important. It was the most awkward thing because Courtney's like, I have to go. And I'm like, wow, that was really damn rude of you, Court. That's like, we usually say thank you. We send a very nice message afterwards. There's some like, when it's done, you cuddle a little bit. And there was absolutely no cuddle. You got your pants on and you left. I had no idea what the hell was happening.
Well, it's perfect like parent moment. I have 4 kids, so I totally get it. It's, it hasn't happened to me yet on a stream yet. I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but no, totally good.
3+ years of doing this, Dustin, something like that has never happened before. And I didn't really quite understand what was going on until I went upstairs. And it was almost like something right out of a comedy movie because as, our youngest threw up, everybody was attempting to help clean up. But they all have like this because somebody else pukes. So then they make the puke noise, then somebody else. And so it was just a series of like,
I was like, in the house gagging, trying to clean up it was a terrible night.
It was like pandemonium, and everybody just lets any sort of like being calm, cool, and collected. They're like, to hell with that. We need pandemonium. So we got like our poor son has no idea because our oldest daughter, who is a very dominant personality, is telling him one thing. Mom's telling him another. I come upstairs. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Do this. So he's just like 3 people telling me 3 separate things. All because this poor kid
Like a big family's nightmare is if it's like the stomach bug, but what is it called? It's like not salmonella, but there's like I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's always a big family's nightmare because one kid gets it or like one of the parents has it and then it just spreads like wildfire. And then each person has like the 24 to 48 hours of nightmare wrapped around the toilet. Was it that or was it just like an isolated incident?
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes. And that's how it's been since the kids went back to school. When one of them gets it, it's all of a sudden it's just like, who's getting it next? You just wait your turn. And like throughout like maybe a 5 to 7 day period, it knocks out all 6 of us. And in the instance of last time, it hit Courtney once on the front end and once on the back end. So we got that double bubble.
We always joke because my wife like was raised in Italy. They used to eat like raw eggs and stuff. So I always joke with her that she has like the iron stomach because she can like eat and drink like anything and she's totally fine. Whereas like I'll get one like piece of something that's got a tiny green hair on it, and I'm like wrapped around the toilet for 3 days. And so it's always a big joke, like dad's going to be out. Like if someone has the bug, like my wife, Kim, she'll just like burp and it's over. For me, I'm just like, it's like, days and days. So I always dread those moments. I always isolate. I'm like, all right, guys, you do your thing down here and dad's going to be living on the 3rd floor for the next week. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye. I do love you, but stay away from me.
Yeah, I love you, but just don't come near me at all.
So like my come up was in construction. So I was out in the field for the better part of like, 16, 17 years. I would never get sick. I'd get sick like once every 2 years, like had an incredible immune system. Now work more of like a white collar role. I'm not out in the sewers. I'm not out in the trenches. And I swear the girls go to school, they come home and whatever they get at school, it comes to me like a damn magnet.
He has been sick in the last like 4 years more than in all the years combined that we have been together.
Wow. Yeah. It's like the bugs evolve, over time. It's like you've got it and then all of a sudden, it hits you. All right. Well, you're getting through it though. They grow up and then it doesn't spread so much.
Yeah, the bigs are chilled, although they hate it because they get all the little kids' sickness because we have like 2 sets, very vastly different ages. So before we get on to too much of a tangent and this becomes a parenting podcast rather than a card collecting podcast, which, I feel like a lot of our followers can appreciate, but not everyone. So.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. So aside from Stranger Things cards, because you were talking about how you have 2 separate entities that you're kind of running, you're building. let's talk a little bit about your sports cards and because that's kind of where you started, right? Where like the niche that you began. Talk about the evolution of that a little.
As far as the collecting part or the content piece?
Both. Let's both. Well,
Okay.
I'm assuming the collecting part came and then the content came after.
Yeah, I think like typical people, I mean, I was collecting in, from 87 to 94, 95. Those were kind of my prime collecting years. And it was a whole different world, obviously, back then. I mean, you had Beckett magazines and stuff you were looking at, like Tough Stuff. And, I mean, it was just a totally different world. Now we've got pricing apps and all sorts of technology, the internet, that we didn't have back then. But I got back into the hobby 2018. And in part one, I kind of explained how the Stranger Things show kind of got me into that nostalgic, place.
Right.
2018, though, is when I really started buying stuff. And it was comic books, graded comic books, but a lot of sports cards as well. I would say I was fairly diversified in 2018. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of the stuff that I couldn't afford when I was a kid in 2018. I bought I did some smart things. I bought like a Jim Brown rookie card, PSA 3, and it was like $180, in 2018. And then, I got like Joe Montana rookie card, PSA 8. And the funny thing is part of the reason why I didn't buy a lot more of it then, because I thought there were so many cool things, but I was like, looking at the prices over like months, I'm like, this stuff is always going to be here at this price. Like the Joe Montana rookie card, PSA 8, they were all over eBay for like 130, 140, 160. I'm like, I can just come back and get another one whenever I want, so it wasn't like it was a big rush to like stack cards, because I don't think anyone really saw what was coming, in 2020.
How could they?
Yeah, it was wild. So I started kind of buying slowly 2018, 2019. And then in late 2019, one of the channels that I caught was Jeff Wilson, Sports Card Investor. And I'd seen other card channels. I wasn't really big into the breaking stuff. I know a lot of people, they find cards through breaks. And I've never really been big into it. I don't know. I'm not a huge gambler in that sense. I like to watch the high-end stuff where it's like, ooh, is someone going to pull like a cool high-end card? But I've never been one that's just been, entranced in break. So when he came out and some of the other folks came out and we're just kind of talking about just general hobby topic stuff, I was like, man, I wish there was more of that. Like I remember watching like a few of these channels and like they do like one episode a week. And I'm like, man, that like 15 minutes is gone now. And now I've got to wait, another week. And now I feel like we're in kind of, I don't know if like the golden age of content is the right word for it, but just we have so much now that there's always something on every single day. I've got something on in the background because there's probably 30 different channels that I watch consistently all the time. So yeah, got back into cards, slowly kind of buying into things. I bought like an 89 score football set because that was like, my family was middle class. My dad was in the military, growing up. So, 89 score was kind of like what the rich kids had. 89 score football with like Barry Sanders rookie and that stuff. I remember I had friends like their dad was stacking that stuff in their closet. And I was like, oh my gosh, you've got like, cases of 89 score football. Whereas I was buying like 75-cent packs of 89 Pro set, which still a really cool set. But, that was, so when I got back in, I was like, full set of 89 scores, $40, in a binder. I'll take that. So I bought like 1990 Marvel Universe set, $50. Great. So I was just getting a lot of the nostalgic stuff. And then over time, I would say middle of 2019, like summer of 19 was the first time I was like, you know what? I'm going to I was looking at Patrick Mahomes and Luka Doncic were like the two guys where I was like, here's like some prospects that like, I wouldn't mind getting into some of their cards. Those were the first two guys. Now, the problem was I probably should have stopped I should have just like put all my money into those two guys, but I ended up buying those guys. And then I was like, oh, look at all these other guys. So I bought like 100 other guys too. So it did really well on the Luka and Pat Mahomes stuff, and then I had a bunch of other things that, did well on some and then held some too long and whatever, like I think most people do. But that was 2019 was when I really started to prospect on some of these players. Still buying vintage stuff as well, but started buying in more. And then the pandemic hit March 2020. And I'd been talking for a few months about starting a channel at that point. And that's when I was like, all right, I literally have no excuses now. I'm trapped in my house. I have nothing better to do than take half hour and try to figure out how to make videos on YouTube. So I did that, started it out. It was really, really bad. And I'm not saying that they're amazing now, but they were really bad back then. It was literally like, I look like I'm in a jail cell. Like, downstairs, it's just white walls behind me, like, hi, everybody. It's like, my 8-year-old does better videos than me, than what I was doing then. But it was more of just like, I'd never done anything like that. And it's just like, put yourself out there, see what happens. And, and then over time I got more comfortable. And then also just trying to figure out what type of content to make. That started to become a challenge in itself, where, okay, you're starting to see your subscribers build. And I was fortunate just to get in at a good time to where it was like people were starting to search for it on YouTube, so I was catching kind of these people getting back in. And so I was seeing momentum pretty early on, and so and then I just never really stopped doing that and just kind of kept on. I'm not every single day, but if you average out my videos, I've done 1,200 videos and a little over 3 years, it's about one a day. But I've always kept that momentum, in part just to like stay disciplined with it. And because I feel like, oh, if I take like a couple of weeks off, I just won't go back, or what if I don't go back to it? Or what if I'm not consistent? It's kind of like working out at the gym or something, like, if I take a couple of weeks off, I might never go back to it. So that's kind of how I got started. And it's just kind of evolved into where I am today.
I find it fascinating because we had something very similar where we too, like, I think Jeff's videos were some of the first ones that we found that we watched with any sort of consistency. And it's not because I don't say they were better or worse than anybody else, but they were consistent. The quality was what like very much appealed to me, was that like, okay, in this space, they can have something that's a little more professional and a little more refined. And like, I'm very analytical. I like numbers. And so I like the fact that I found like content that it was not just like, hey, this is a cool card and let's talk about some of the stuff behind it. Whether or not you agree with it, that's neither here nor there. We came up with the idea to do Hobby Night School. This used to just be an Instagram live. And if you were on the live, you got to see it. Otherwise, we never posted it on Spotify or Anchor. We never put it on YouTube. And we're starting to go back and do that now. I remember the nerves of the first time, like, how are we going to be received? And then after the first live, thinking, holy God, that was terrible. That was like the same thing. There's 4 and 5-year-olds that are, 40, 50,000 followers. They're having better videos than whatever the hell that was, Courtney. We need to quit. As you were making your content, how did you decide what was going to be your alley or your lane? Was it based on like, hey, that felt right? Was it based on the feedback you were getting from the people who were watching it? How did you determine what you were going to do? Because I'm always fascinated by that, because sometimes what you set out to do isn't always what you end up doing.
Yeah, I started doing kind of daily news style stuff right around when I started out. I mean, I was doing hobby topics, that were fairly, I don't want to say like mundane or dull, but maybe just more like evergreen types topics. And I was like, those are fun to do, kind of the research type stuff. But I also like when there's something new going on in the hobby, some new topic or some buyout, some company bought another company. We see that all the time now. And I like talking about the business finance side of the hobby as well. So I think it is part of just kind of finding your lane and what you're comfortable with, because the other part is like, if you're doing content that you don't really enjoy doing, then you probably won't stick with it. If you're doing it just for the sake of maybe building a channel because you run a business, or building a channel because, for whatever reason, I think that for consistency's sake, you have to find something you really enjoy. And so that was one. But I think, to speak to what you're saying, I didn't really know what I enjoyed or what I was really good at when I started. So it was more trial and error, where I just kind of like tried different things, threw it out in the universe. And then I would get feedback where, hey, this wasn't very good, or this was good. And then I tried to mix it around, try different things. I think that's a big thing too, is I try to just, fail fast, just try to figure out like, all right, this didn't go over well, or this did. I'm going to double down on the stuff that's good. I'm going to try to avoid, so just trying to kind of finesse it as you go, because you're never going to just nail it. Unless, and I guess for me is I'm not like I have a sales background, so like I'm not necessarily I'm going to plan this out for a year and a half. I'm going to like project manage this out, and then I'm going to start. It's kind of more of like, I'm just going to start. I'm just going to go fast, and then I'll probably trip and fall and hit all the hurdles on the way down the track. But then I'll learn from some of that. And I did find that kind of that newsy type stuff, I enjoyed it. I did not see a lot of people doing it consistently. And I think that's what you said about Jeff. Whether you like Jeff or didn't like him or whatever, he was there 2 or 3 times a week kind of doing his thing. And and back then there just wasn't a lot of options. Now you do have a lot more options. And now actually there's a lot of channels that do new stuff. A lot of them do, so, but that was kind of a lane that 3 years ago, I was like, this is really fun. I like doing it. I can throw in dumb like NES clips, or I can throw in like goofy things that I want to throw in, as I'm giving my take. And then I also like to track pricing. So like, for example, breaking the news, Cardboard Chronicles, Josh, he had put out a teaser. This is going back to either June or July of 2020. And he put out this hit the Cardboard Chronicles channel. I was subscribed to it, and it was like I remember it like it was yesterday, like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. It was on my YouTube subscription thing, so I watched it, and it was this preview for Card Ladder, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. So I did a video immediately on his announcement, kind of his teaser, and that was them, I guess, announcing to the world that they were going to do this Card Ladder. And so he reached out to me immediately and was like, hey, who are you? And so I talked to him, and then I did videos using Card Ladder. And over the years, I've used Market Movers as well, but kind of tracking ups and downs and talking about it. I'm not really one. I've never been a big picks guy. I've done some of that stuff. If you go all the way back, I had some where I'm like, I'm buying this player. I like him for this reason. But, as we've seen, and Jeff has evolved his stuff, a lot of channels were doing that stuff if you go back to 2020. But everyone just kind of evolved off of it, just because it just became less trendy. And also it just wasn't as like fun to do, frankly. Like, I don't necessarily want to, pick the next LeBron James. I would rather just talk about like, wow, it's interesting that this went up and this went down. What do you guys think? I like to kind of throw a topic out there, kind of add my 2 cents, look at it from 3 different angles, and then throw it out. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And that's also good for engagement too.
It's rough too to like make picks, because when you're wrong and you have a following, you could legit, if people listen to you, you could cause harm. So that was one area. I don't think we ever did that. And that's just because I'm fearful of giving people advice.
However, we have been very candid in like our strategy
with what we're doing. We'll be like,
but we always say like, hey, you have to do your own due diligence. And also we make it's important to share, like when we lose or when we make a mistake or something doesn't go as planned, because there's value in learning. And what's like the old adage, like if you don't pay attention to history, it tends to repeat itself, something along those lines. Which
we have not yet learned with buying retail wax, because we still do that, and I have never once thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, well, I wrapped all that. I would say that was definitely like 2020 trial and error stuff. But I had way more people come to me, that said like, hey man, I made so much money in 2020 from this or that or whatever. And that's not what I wasn't trying. I was never like a buy this card now, channel at all, ever. I never.
Well, but you should have been, because you're good at it.
Well,
everybody was.
Everybody was. Everybody was, and that was the thing. So,
you can't lose.
Yeah, everything was kind of moving up. So, but it wasn't I didn't feel like so because I was meeting a lot of longtime hobbyists along the way too, as my channel was growing. I never wanted to come across as I'm a card expert, because I'm far from a card expert. Today, 5 years in, I'm not a card expert. I might know about specific niche things, like we talk about Stranger Things cards, but I mean, these guys run circles around me with 90s inserts and vintage and all the stuff. So I didn't want to come across as like, this is me, I'm here to direct you on your sports card journey. It's more of like, hey, I'm here and this is what I'm doing. And if you like it, great. If you don't, that's cool too. But let's talk about it. That's my channel. I
like that. That's how we kind of started Hobby Night School, because there was so much we didn't know. So we would reach out to people that if we wanted to do an episode about teaching people about Stranger Things cards, I'd be like, I gotta call Dustin, because dude knows more about Stranger Things cards than anybody I know.
That's about it.
Well, I mean, you know more about that thing than I know about almost anything else. So that's cool. It's fun to be able to be like, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I need, to have somebody who knows more than us. And like you having a platform where you're using your platform to be like, hey, look at these. This is how you read these analytics and this and that. And that's cool. It's awesome. And you're providing value in a space where, there's just like, hey, watch me open this box. And you're like, hey, let's talk about why we're going to, buy this card or why this happened. I think that's neat.
Thank you. Yeah. One thing I've tried out in 2023, I'm doing reaction videos. And so a lot of people, they're like, oh man, he's going to tear into this person. Sometimes I'll kind of tease like that. Like I play like a RoboCop clip that's like, dead or alive, you're coming with me. Like at the very beginning when I'm talking about who I'm going to like react to. But a lot of times I'd say like, well, not a lot of times, every time it's kind of like a take on both sides. I might say like, I agree with Jeff Wilson on this, but I don't agree with these things or whatever. And so, but what I've done is I've used that to call out other channels to really promote other channels. So it's like, it's a reaction video. And most of the time it's just basically like, hey, I really like this video that this person did. And it might be a channel that I've never met before. Actually, I did that with Sports Card Therapist with Rob. Never met him, never talked to him, nothing. And him and another content creator, they were talking about a topic I thought was really interesting. So I reacted to it. And then, you know, Rob reached out to me and we've done like a dozen episodes together. So it's also like a way to collaborate with people and meet new people. I also think of myself as like an entertainer in the space as much like it's infotainment. So I also like to call out if there's something where I'm like, this was hilarious. I want to like put it out there because I think that, you know, for me, this is just an extension of my hobby. This is just fun, a fun extension that's become more of a business, I guess, that my content has, you know, just over time. But that's, you know, it's just meant to be a fun extension of what I'm doing.
How much content do you consume that is stuff that you don't necessarily like? Because I actually consume a fair amount of stuff that I wouldn't say that I like, but I am curious and I'm always interested in like capturing another perspective. And once in a while, I find myself, you know, maybe a little bit surprised, like, oh, wow, they have a point, or I can kind of see where they're coming from. Or I'm like, yeah, I was right. They're batshit crazy. How much of that? Because you said every day there's something on it. I'm the same way every day. Like I try to consume as much as humanly possible because it's escapism. I enjoy it and it comes easy to me. So, you know, that 4, 5, 6 hours if I'm driving, podcast, you know, video format, like, can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm always interested. I always think that I'm a little bit of a squirrely person, but you said earlier, you said you like to look at it from a 3D perspective. So I'm thinking that you might consume some stuff that you don't necessarily like, but are just trying to capture a different vantage point.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I listen to people. Actually, I think about that too. It's funny that you bring that up because there's people that I don't necessarily know, but I'm like, personally, I don't really know if I like this person, but I like their takes. I like their hobby takes. But if I met them, I don't know if I'd actually like them, you know? So, but to your, or maybe I would, you know, I mean, so I think that's what makes it kind of fun. I listen to stuff in the background every single day. I listen to probably, I would guess maybe at least a couple of hours of stuff now. But what happens is kind of like what you said. I mean, there's so many shows now, whether it be Jeremy Lee or it's you guys, or it's, Rob, or it's, you know, I feel like every single day there is an hour-long show that I'm subscribed to that I'll catch, you know, and then there's short form guys like me that do the 10-minute, 12-minute videos, and those pop out as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily sitting there and kind of like, you know, paying very, very close attention to everything, but I'll have it on the background while I'm doing stuff. Or if I'm mowing the lawn, I'll have it like my earpiece and I'll be listening to it. I do listen to it to study how people present certain things. And then also what are their takes? And then, you know, also, you know, are people talking smack about me? Because there's channels that talk smack about me, and I would like to watch those just for fun. I mean, there's all sorts of things, you know, it's all entertaining. So, but yeah, I do watch, I would say on average, probably 2 hours a day of hobby content, I would guess.
That's awesome. I'm so terrible about not listening to stuff that I don't like because it just, Jeremy's a way better person when it comes to that. I definitely listen to a lot. I consume so much hobby content. It's outside of podcasts too. Like I really enjoy like hobby TikTok. I really enjoy like Instagram in general. There's like a lot of people that put a lot of effort into their posts, be it like vintage card collectors that tell a whole story about like a card that they're collecting. I like to read, so I'm reading a lot of like magazines. Like PSA has a magazine out, I read that. I read obviously Basketball Card Fanatic. How much other like content, not like just podcasts and not just YouTube, are you consuming? Or is that the content that you two, because I know Jeremy, like he is on podcasts all the time, but are there other forms of content that you guys are, you know, consuming? And,
Well,
what do you think
like you know that I consume just an insane amount. I've never even attempted to capture Clubhouse, and Courtney's on Clubhouse all the time.
Oh, really?
And so like that, and I'm like, I don't even know if I could even make that happen, even if I tried my hardest, man, because it's like there's so much out there.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm not on TikTok, so I'm missing all of the TikTok only stuff, unless they do kind of the TikTok plus IG or plus YouTube Short or something. Then I'll catch it. Cardboard Coaches do that. They've got like the TikTok and they've got I like their stuff, but I'm not on TikTok really at all for that. For IG, I'll catch like Lamine James and stuff, but that's what drives me crazy. And that's where I'm glad you guys are on YouTube. But like the IG lives, it's like, and I don't know if I'm not doing something right, but with IG lives, like you got to stay on the app to listen to it, right? Unless I'm not, so for me, that sucks. Like with a podcast or YouTube or whatever, you can just like, you can get off, I can do 5 other things. I'm playing like a video game on my phone while I'm listening to people talk, with YouTube or podcast. With IG, I think too, I like to watch some of it, but I'm not as much of the short form, the 30 to 45 seconds, and then you move on to the next. It's just not the way that I'm wired. I do watch some of it though. I watch some of it, but I'm kind of more of like, I like to listen to people dive into a topic, like, with you guys doing a podcast or, I don't do a lot of long form. I do some live streams and stuff, but most of my stuff is 7 to 12 minutes or whatever my videos are. So that's where I like to just dig in and let people, get into a conversation and then, listen to more about and they'll also reveal like more about their personal life or something that you wouldn't catch. That quick stuff. I know that like I should probably, get more into it, but I haven't done it as much.
Do you know what I think the value in that is, for me personally, and I think maybe other people, and I would love to know what people think about this, is some of those like, I'll be on TikTok and I'll be scrolling and I'll see something like a tidbit of news. And it's always like, 30 seconds. And then I'm like intrigued and I want to know more about that. And that's when I'll like move over to YouTube and like search the subject and see who's making a long video about it. And I found tons of content creators and YouTube channels that I want to personally listen to because they're posting shorts and like talks about things. And I'm like, now I want to know about that. And sometimes it's like a totally random different person, but I heard the topic on TikTok and then I go over to, YouTube to see if I can learn more about it. And I think there is value in that. It's so much work to do all of these different like platforms.
That's where I struggle. Yeah, I know YouTube Shorts and IG Reels, and that I need to do better at it. I had my daughter do one for me, and she might just be doing all of that stuff for me, but yeah, because I have been trying to figure out how do I drive more traffic to my videos. And that's one way, exactly what you're saying, like take a piece of the video, put it, and it doesn't even take that long to do it. But if you're going to make it really good, then it does take time. Like I can take a little snippet, I can trim it and throw it up there, but it won't do as well if I don't, there's people that put a lot of effort into them, so I'm still trying to figure out that part.
Almost 19,000 subscribers. That is wild. Absolutely wild. 1,200 plus videos. Absolutely nuts. And now you just added DPZ.
Yeah.
And not only, and if I misspeak anything, please correct me, but I think you have the DPZ Collector Series. And then he's doing the show with Jeremy Lee that's distributed on Jeremy's channel and your channel as well. How did you land a big dog like DPZ?
Like what George Washington in the middle of the night, like took, like crossing the I need to pull out my history book, but whichever river he crossed to kill all the British. No, but basically once I heard
That's personal history, Dad. That's for sure.
Definitely not history, Dad. Definitely not history, Dad. Yeah, my 17-year-old's got history now. He's not asking me any other questions. No. So I do pay attention to Luca Nation. I liked watching those guys, both Cage and Andrew. And I did notice, because I just pay attention to everything. I don't watch necessarily everything, but I pay attention. And those are some of the few guys that were doing more so daily stuff like I was. And I did notice that after the Mint, there was like a few days that went by and there wasn't anything that came out. And I kind of proactively reached out to DPZ. and was just like, and I wasn't trying to like pry or whatever. I'm not really a gossip. I'm not a gossipy person, but I was just like, hey, I've noticed that they haven't put up any videos. Are you, because he was also putting up videos as well at the same time. And so I just asked him, is there anything kind of going on there, or, are you still making videos or what, whatever. I was just kind of asking without trying to pry. And then he was kind of like, I'm not really sure, I just want to like take some time, figure it out. So I was like, okay, I just let him kind of do his thing. And then, a few more days went by, and then it was and he's like, I don't really know what's going on. And so, and I was like, well, hey, look, if you want to bring that collector series to my show, obviously if everything is good there, I don't want to like mess that up. But if it's not, then you can certainly bring that show to my channel, because I really enjoyed it. I did a show with him and Basketball Card Guy and Real 27. I'm like I'm mixing them all together.
You got Adam, you've got John, and then you got
Dennis.
DPC.
Adam,
I love all those guys. That's like
yeah.
the trifecta of awesome dudes.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. And I did a kind of like a panel thing with DPZ that he had invited me to, and I had a blast. So I thought he was a great host. Thought he was really good at hosting, and that's what he enjoys doing. I know he's got a band background, a music background. And I was just like, man, and he was kind of more of the thing, because I also was like, dude, if you want to start your own channel, start your own channel. And I also said, if you tomorrow want to start your own channel, that's fine with me. This isn't like a, exclusive arrangement. It's just, here's a place you can park your stuff. And I've got a pretty decent platform if you want to. And if not, then that's totally cool. And so, yeah, it just worked out well. I don't know with the collector series, he's got a family, and he's, I've got stuff going on. I don't know if he's going to be able to keep doing collector series and that show with Jeremy, because that show on Jeremy is weekly. But either way, yeah, he's doing stuff every week on the channel, and it's been great. So
I think it's a great fit, because admittedly, I haven't watched all 1,200 videos. I'd like to say that I did, but I would be lying. I liked a lot because there's the ones that I've seen are more so about you being very candid about what's going on personally within your collection, whether it's finance. And I think that's really when I went down the rabbit hole, is when you were talking about money, because that's something that we've gravitated towards in the last 6 to 12 months, is talking about, like, setting some boundaries for yourself, personal finance and that sort of thing. But along with DPZ has like a general curiosity, and I like people who are authentic. The person who comes in and says that they know everything about everything, I'm instantly put off by. But yeah, he's got a willingness and he's got the ability to say, hey, I don't know. You're more experienced. Let me ask these sincere questions that most people are having, but sometimes they're too afraid to listen to. So I thought it made for a good fit for your channel.
Oh, I appreciate that. And he's a humble dude. He knows a lot about, Griffey cards. He doesn't reveal that, he's never going to brag about it, but he knows more than he kind of puts on. But you're right. He's not going to be the smartest guy in the room. And that's what's attractive about, having him on the show. I think too, it gets sticky when you have big egos and then you're trying to fit big egos together. That's where you don't, the chemistry just isn't there. It just doesn't work, So yeah, with DPZ, that was an easy one.
Yeah. The hobby is chock full of big egos too. So it's nice to see, some genuine, real content where people are just kind of talking about their own experiences. I think we have fun with that. Like, I don't know, if anybody's been watching our last like several videos, it's just me and Jeremy taking L after L after L. It was really bad for a while there. I'm like, what are we even doing? This is stupid. I'm like, I'm going back to for Disney cards. I do way better at that. Like, that's the only way I've been.
Well, and then right before we went live, we posted, we just picked up a new Patrick Williams 1/1 for the PC, like nice. A Contenders Championship ticket. It's a beautiful card. And so, like, that's what I was doing. I was tweeting it right before we hit record. And so, like, now there's a W out there, because it's like, whether or not anybody likes him, we clearly like him, and it's cool to share cool cards.
Oh, that's one of the ones where we take so much flack. Like, some people are like, oh, you guys are brilliant, he's wonderful, and other people are like, what the hell are you spending all your money on Patrick
Williams? Yeah.
They get angry too. They're like very angry, like I
how dare you
with them, or like I didn't help this or something like that. They were angry.
Yeah, I got the same thing on my Stranger Things video, where it's like, here's my Stranger Things collection. It's like money just just pissed down the drain. You know, like that's just money lost. It's like, dude, it's not your money, and it's like it's fine. You know, it's not a big deal. But one thing I was going to ask you with your business, if you don't, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but for you guys, it's a family affair. Obviously, you're having a lot of fun with what you're doing. Do you look at the business as kind of like, are you looking to make big profits, or is it kind of more of a thing where it's like, hey, if we break even and we're having a great time and like we can fund it, because you guys have day jobs and other things that you're doing, so it's not like you're not living and dying by Reckless Cards.
Correct.
You know, or are you looking to kind of grow it into, you know, more of a an income? Yeah. What's your goal there?
If it could be a sustainable income at some point, like that, sure. We've romanticized that.
Who collects cards and does a big band? Wouldn't it be cool to own your own card shop that is like, that's your job and you get to get up every day and play with cards and that's your job? You know, I think like who wouldn't have that as, I don't know. No,
SOP for us is after we visit a card shop is to be like, oh, I love that. That's so cool. When we have
our card shop.
When we have our card shop, and then you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do TVs here, and there's gonna be a lounge here, and
we should do a cigar bar.
Yeah, and Michael,
what if we got one with a restaurant upstairs so that we can have a restaurant,
a nightclub, a coffee shop, all in one card shop.
It's just
and then like the reality of like, hey, the cost of the building, you're like, oh well, maybe that's maybe a next month sort of thing to talk about. So I mean, realistically, that who doesn't? I think most people that I've ever encountered in this space like the idea of it. I think people, as they go further down that path, don't truly understand the amount of work that goes into it, the amount of networking, the amount of like constant grind to make sure that you've got wax and that you're constantly buying and selling. Like some of those tasks are monotonous and tedious, and I think when people get into it, it pushes them off. For us, I think the true value is it does distract us from the normal wear and tear and rigors of everyday life. It's something that where we can all be together. We've got
all of our kids collect cards. They all collect cards, and so it's something like as an entire family we do.
Yeah, that's where so normally I would say like starting a card shop, like I don't know, but the fact that you guys have your whole family's into it, that actually could be like a really cool legacy thing, you know. I mean, because that was another thing I was going to get at with YouTube, and I don't know if it's like this with you guys making content as well, but I also just think about like I just had a grandfather pass away, and I was thinking like, man, I don't really know much about like his life, like going back in time, you know, like, yeah, I know he was in the Air Force, he was a pilot, you know, that's cool. I've got a bunch of his gear that I'm getting, which is awesome, but I don't have anything to look back on. Whereas like future generations, assuming like these videos stay up somewhere in the interwebs or whatever, you know, people can find it. They can be like, oh, that's what my dad was doing, or my grandfather, or great granddad was doing this. So that's also kind of an interesting kind of part too. I joke kind of about this being part of my midlife crisis, but I think it is kind of like you get to, I'm 42, you know, get to a point where you're like, man, my days could be numbered, you know, like, what am I doing here? You know, what's the purpose? This could be kind of an ad. I'm not saying like this is my purpose, but it's kind of it's a part of it. You know, it's a part of that journey.
Think about how cool it is when our kids really like are in they're our age and we're old and hopefully maybe still alive, but you never know.
Me and Dustin are old court. You're still a spry young thing.
I mean, that's very true, but I'm kidding. But you know, they could show my grandchildren videos of like, look what this is your grandma, look how hot she was, you know. I'm kidding, but I never like, for us right now, we buy and sell, we set up at shows because we enjoy doing that all together. The kids love going to shows, they love making TikToks with me. That's really why we do as many TikToks as we do, because Amelia and Steven love to do TikToks. So it's something that we can do together. And right now, our space in the hobby, we make enough money to support buying stuff that we don't want to sell. And that's really what it is. So we buy and sell stuff that we don't, you know, that like is liquid. So we can buy things like a P-Will Contenders auto that we are not going to sell, you know.
Right.
I think for me personally, I didn't grow up with a lot of family. I still don't have a lot of family outside of my wife and kids and like my in-laws. So having these experiences and these memories, I don't have those from when I was a child. So that's incredibly important to me. So we went to Chicago this past weekend. It was our daughter's 6th birthday. So we made sure we stayed at a nice Hilton with a beautiful pool. So to her, it was this big deal. Like, I'm going to Chicago for my birthday. Going to go out to this cool restaurant. I'm going to swim. Then we're going to go to Dave and Buster's. Then we're going to go out to another nice restaurant. Then we're going to have a fun road trip home. Like, the card show was cool. But what I remember is like all those fun things, like, you know, when you stop at an Oasis and something funny happens, or our son took Dramamine and was acting like he had been on a 14-day bender. He was so out of it. And it was, you know, mom getting mad at him because he didn't clean up the French fries that spilled. Like, it's just like, it makes for awesome memories. And
well, and he also helped run at someone else's table and sold their cards for them, which is a big responsibility. And nobody was monitoring him. And these weren't our cards. They weren't his cards. Somebody trusted him enough to stand at their table across the room without any guidance. And he did a really good job. And so that's like something that I was really proud of. And that was like something that happened at this particular show that I will remember, because that was the first time he ever did anything like that.
Well, Manny said it best, or at least it was appealing to me. And I very rarely give Manny his flowers. He's like, we're old and we like cards. Where are we going to make friends at? And to his point, like, you go there and you're like, man, these are my friends. Like, I talk with you folks more than I do like my damn neighbors, because they're not into cardboard. They're wackos.
I know. It's sad when we have like, you know, we'll have like work friends over or something, or we're doing like holiday party. It's going to be at our house. Cool. We have all these work friends over. I'm like, who could I ask to come upstairs and look at my, like, because my office is my studio. Like, the background, I've got the paintings where I'm like doing the videos. It's all in my office. So like, I'm like, who would want to go to my office? And sometimes it's just nobody. And that's sad, you know? So yeah, but doing this, we've met, I mean, I know you guys have too, just tons of people that you otherwise would not hang out with or talk to if it wasn't for this. So
100%.
Some of our very best friends now are card people. Like, I obviously, you know, I'm more of a sociable person than Jeremy is. So I have a lot more friends than he does that are outside of cards. But now, here's something fun. I started my own podcast with my friend Sarah, who's also a card person, but we talk about true crime.
Yeah, I heard about it. I saw an episode where you're talking about it.
Yeah, so my friends who don't like cards now are listening to that podcast because they do like true crime, and they're learning about cards. And I have friends now who reach out to me and ask me about cards, and like they'll send me stories of athletes for my show, and then they are really excited to see the sports cards that I've purchased due to, you know, this genre that we're doing, even though it's very macabre. But it's like this weird genre that has like brought more people. And the Stranger Things cards, I was at this weekend, and I had like, you know, women come up to my booth all the time and they're like, oh, I don't collect. I'm here with him. I'm not. And I always ask every woman that comes up, oh, what do you collect? And they're like, oh, I don't collect. Not all of them. Some do collect, but often when they walk up with their husband or boyfriend or whatever, they're like, oh, I'm just here with him. So then I start talking about the non-sports cards. I'm like, look, I have Stranger Things, I have Disney, we have Pokemon, we have, you know, I bought my mom a set of like Real Housewives of New York cards, and they're like, they make those? I'm like, they make cards for everything. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is more interesting than I thought it was. And every day a new collector is born. When you have to appeal to what they like.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been diving down the road of athletes, so for sports, but then also non-sports, like actor autos that are like the in-person, but then have inscriptions, you know, so it has like a cool, like movie quote on it. And you're like, man, that's really cool. And they're usually one of a kind, or you just don't see, like, you know, I mean, they're literally eBay one of ones, because it's just a random card that was signed with an inscription. And if you know, and then you look at price points and stuff, if it feels right to you. I saw one that was like, Marissa Tomei and Joe Pesci had signed a, what was the movie that they were in, that classic?
My Cousin Vinny?
Yes, they signed a My Cousin Vinny card. I'm like, they have My Cousin Vinny cards? But yeah, I saw it on eBay. I was like, wow, that's cool.
Well, so, it's very lucky I didn't see that card, because I definitely would have bought it. That is one of my most favorite movies.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like stuff like that where just random things pop up out of nowhere. And you're right. I mean, it's like you might not be into sports cards, but there's cards for everything going all the way back.
Did you think in 2018, when you got back into it and you're buying, you know, Pat Mahomes and Luka Doncic, that you'd be buying My Cousin Vinny cards?
No, I wish though that I wish that I had kind of broadened my scope though, at that point, because all that stuff was dirt cheap, just like everything else, so yeah, you could have gotten in on a lot of, well, probably everything cheaper than now, but yeah, I mean, but I think also that's just kind of part of the journey though. It's like when people are like, oh man, you were buying this in 2018, 19. Well, yeah, I mean, hell, it takes time to learn about all the sets and all the different things. It's like, I learned from watching other podcasts, other YouTube, and then also, IG or whatever, but all that takes time. It doesn't just happen miraculously where you just know the, like all these sets.
Like I decided to collect cards and now I know everything about it. Don't you?
Yeah. Well,
you should hear when I talk to my friends who don't collect and I go on a tangent about parallels and brands and licensed and unlicensed. And they're just like, I literally had no idea that it was anything other than little pieces of cardboard with a picture of a person. That's all I thought it was. I didn't know that there was this like whole subculture. And my friends tell me that I'm part of a subculture. And I'm like, I just collect. They're like, no, you are in a cult.
Yeah. Card cults. I joke with that with other content creators, like, man, card cults, we're in the second inning. We're just getting started with these card cults.
For sure. I think it's like fascinating too, because if you would have told me 3-4 years ago that I would ever even look at a TCG card, let alone check out an anime, I would have been like, no, I'll die a million times over before that happens. And like naturally I've gravitated towards like TCG, learning that game, because from a like rip grade flip perspective,
right,
so much better than sports. And I find the community to be a lot more welcoming than that of the sports community within the hobby. And it's like fascinating, because then Courtney went down to like the Disney cards and like some of the alternative stuff, or stuff like this Netflix cards that we got laying around, or Stranger Things cards all over Dune, whatever the hell that is, laying around down here.
Now my struggle is, so I collect cards, but then I've also got like graded video games or graded comic books and graded action figures. So it's all like that nostalgic stuff. I've got He-Man figures from 1985 that are still in the box. So I'm still hanging on to like that, 86 to, I'd say like 85 to 95, or really like that 10 years it was like the greatest part of my childhood. So all the things, I have Beavis and Butthead clips in my videos. Like, I mean, that's all part of my fun, is like throwing in random like Kung Fu NES clip here. And people, because I want people to be like, what the hell was that? Like, why was that in the video?
If you get the opportunity, I'm telling you, and I know that I will get absolutely crushed for saying this, but you would have had a blast at VCon in Gary's garage. Because I set up with somebody who was the same exact thing. We brought the Turtles arcade game, graded comic books, graded video games, TCG, Pokemon, action figures, toys that I didn't even know existed. And the amount of people there that were into that, like of all the collectibles that were there, sports trading cards were by far the least. Like nobody cared about that. Everybody cared about the graded video games, the toys, all that cool stuff. You would have been with your people. And you would have been hailed as a king, not as an oddball or a weirdo.
And I've heard other people talk too that, so one big difference that you'll see with comic books or maybe action figures, I'm not saying everybody, but in cards and sports cards especially, there's a big emphasis on comps and getting, it's like selling at 70%, to then sell, to then turn it over or buy at 70%, sell at 90 or whatever of comps. Whereas like there's a deep collector base for, these, action figures or for comic books. So I'm not saying that people aren't looking for a deal, but it's more buy and hold folks, that are buying these items, as opposed
to the end collector versus like people buying them to turn them over.
For sure.
What I recently found out, that there is a huge culture of people that collect cereal boxes.
Oh, really?
That is a huge collectible. I had no idea. I learned this from TikTok. There was a man that actually, it was from Reddit, but it was on TikTok. A man used his kids' like graduation money to buy some like vintage cereal box. And then he justified that by saying that he was teaching his son to invest. I'm like, sir, no. It was like one of those "Am I the asshole?" posts. I'm like, yeah, you are. You bought a cereal box for $500 with your kid's graduation money. You're an asshole.
You catch me on one of those days where it's like there's no meat thawed out or there's not something readily available I want to eat, you best believe I'm opening up that Captain Crunch.
Well, that's what I think is hilarious when people are like, "Oh my God, you spent $1,000 on this, that, or the other thing." And I'm like, dude, there's literally people spending thousands of dollars on all sorts of random things that are, so it's like, pick whatever, like people are collecting random things, like just deal with it,
Do you remember when everybody was buying Oreos because they had Pokemon on them? Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I bought a box of
Yeah.
those, and my kids were eating it. I'm like, oh, did you eat $1,000 Oreo?
Well, wasn't there also like Happy Meals that came out with like a
Yes, with the Pokemon cards in them. Yep.
And people are buying 100 Happy Meals at what, it's like, oh
like
my
just
God.
buying all the Happy Meals so the kids can't have them. Like, come on, guys, you are like, this is beyond.
I still remember the Oreo craze, Court, because we had like legitimately Oreos, and then like I remember just like, oh, double stuff, and you're like, did you eat the one with the thing? I'm like, how the hell did I know the difference? I thought they were cookies.
Well, you can't eat $1,000 Oreo. It's, here's the thing, but that's kind of the fun of it, right? Like that's the whole point. And I think sometimes we get like lost in the weeds of it and we forget that it's supposed to be fun. And, everyone takes everything so seriously. And for me, like there's days where I'm just like, oh, this has sucked all the joy out of it. I don't even want to, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then there's days like where like some great thing happens where my kid sells cards for another dealer and he's like super proud of himself and he comes over and he's like, look what I did, Mom. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is why we do this. So yeah, it's fun,
How do you deal with I'm sure at some point when you have 1 million followers like you do, and you're one of the most popular people on the internet, Dustin, how do you deal with I'm assuming you've dealt with some sort of negativity, whether it's typically comes from like a place of somebody just trying to be a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. Like, have you just grown a thick skin and you don't engage, or do you fight it head on, or how do you deal with that? Because that's like truly one thing that I know Courtney and I personally don't like is like, we try to do right by everybody and we sincerely mean well in all that we do. And we're always open if we make a misstep or if I misspeak, totally down to be accountable and, make things right. But how do you deal with the negativity? Because there seems to be like a subsection of the hobby that are only happy if they've got something to be negative about.
Well, and you nailed it. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's when I first started, I was like, I'm going to be putting things out on the internet. I'm going to get people that don't like it. In fact, most people might not like it. And fortunately, the card community and this community has overwhelmingly been pretty positive compared to other stuff. I mean, I'm not running like a political news channel or something, but it's yes, I've had to block. I probably blocked a dozen people in 3 years. So it's not, but to me, like, that's not very many. That seems like, pretty low number. So there's a couple of things there. I learned to kind of differentiate constructive criticism and then exactly what you said, people that just want to complain because their hobby is complaining. So differentiating between, is this person giving me actual constructive criticism, like your mic doesn't work very well, your hair looks dumb, maybe you should like flip it the other way, or like whatever. Like I can actually, okay, I can work with that. I can work with that. That's fine. You have a stain on your shirt. Fine, I can deal with that. Or you didn't explain this the way that I would have liked to. Whatever. I can deal with that. But it's also like if it's the same person that 99% of the time has got a negative comment, it's like, dude, it's the boy that cried wolf thing where it's like, I already know that you don't like what I put out. You can jump in the comment section if you want, but I mean, that's engagement on YouTube. That's fine. But I'm not going to take it as seriously because I know it's just a reactionary, like I'm going to throw something negative in because it's Monday and tomorrow it'll be Tuesday and we'll do it again. So actually differentiating between what is what takes a little bit of time. In the beginning, I was more kind of like, okay, I'm going to take this in and I'm going to, see how I can adapt. But you learn like who's trolling me and who actually cares about me, explaining something a little bit differently, or I could have done this better or whatever. And then there's people that make videos, about me or whatever. Some of that is, I look at it as a form of entertainment, even if it's talking smack about me, which is, I know that sounds kind of weird, but, it might be how that person finds happiness, in their own life. And so for me, I'm just kind of like, hey, look, if that's what gets someone through their day, then that's okay. It's not the end of the world. I mean, as much as I would like people to like my channel, I'm also, not expecting everybody to like the stuff. So it's like, it is what it is.
Well, you're not ice cream. You can't make everyone happy.
Never will. And I've just kind of accepted it. There's times when I just ignore, and then there's other times where I want to clap back and, say something. And sometimes I do. And it's funny because sometimes you'll clap back and it's like, oh my gosh, you're so sensitive. And it's like, dude, I've ignored your last 100 comments, and 101, I clapped back at you a little bit because it's hypocritical what you said for, whatever. And so I like to have fun with trolls too sometimes, so it is what it is. But you also, you take it with a grain of salt. I don't look at it as necessarily, it's like, these are basically strangers on the internet. So it's like my self-esteem is not going to be derived from what a stranger on the internet has to say. Just, I'm going to do my thing regardless. So.
That's awesome advice. That's good advice for anyone. If they don't matter in your real life, they probably shouldn't matter on the internet either. I'll never forget the first time we had a video go like super viral, and like people like made comments about the way that I looked or my voice. And I remember being like really upset. It really hurt my feelings. You talking about your hair. Like if somebody came on and was like, Courtney's hair is so ugly, I would be so upset. Like if you're like, wow, what you said was wrong and you're dumb, I'd be like, oh, well, okay, I guess I should learn. But like attacking the way someone looks is pretty horrible. So
I had a guy make a video recently that said that I don't want to like I'm sure he'll make a video after he sees this, but called me a Satanist. And then in the video he was talking about how, what did he say? Like, I'm domesticated. It's actually really funny because my brother also watches this occasionally. And so he'll leave me voicemails that say, hey man, you're weak and domesticated. Bye. So my brother watches like these like troll videos. And
oh my God, your brother must love that.
You know how pathetic you are. And then like, like, so, I mean, a lot of it we just have fun with, but yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. At first you're like, man, that kind of stings, like.
I think sometimes people forget that like, everyone's like a person, like real people. Like maybe you're just like watching me or, Dustin or, whoever on a video, and we put ourselves out there and you have to accept that. But like at some point, like, you're talking to an actual person. Like I have to like walk around and think about the mean things that you said about the way that I look, that's a terrible thing to do to some. And you know what it is like, I personally understand that I would never get, even if I don't like somebody's content or I don't like something on the internet, I just like scroll by, unfollow, whatever. I would never like get on and make a mean derogatory comment about another person. So I think that that's where like I struggle with that, because it's like, I wouldn't do this and I can't believe that somebody else does.
Yeah, you think about, you can kind of equate to like one of your kids like screaming in the other room just to get you to come in there and say like, can you chill? Like that's how I kind of look at it too. It's like the kids screaming in the other room, like, oh, I just want attention, and like, all right, fine, here's your attention,
Yeah.
But it's weird, but it is what it is. It's part of the deal, part of the game.
Awkward dead silence.
Oh, sorry. I thought for sure you were following up with that, Court. I'm sorry. I'm like guilty of like overtalk all the time, so I'm always trying to be mindful of like, all right, let her get her piece in. So you've got 19,000 subscribers on this channel. You started another channel that's geared towards collectibles. How is that going? How are you enjoying that space? What can people, or why should people tune over there to see what's going on over there?
So I just separated them out. It used to be called Retro Game Dad, and I rebranded it to Collectibles Dad. And in part just because I like talking about graded video games and just retro video games in general, but also just decided like, why don't I just wrap in all the other things that are not, sports cards into that channel? So I did a video about Pokemon cards the other day and kind of they printed 9 billion cards. What do we all think about that? I did a video today about a Hakes auction that ended for Amazing Spider-Man #1. So it's kind of like all the other pop culture, collectibles type things. I'm covering it on the Collectibles Dad channel. And that's fun for me and you guys probably know this, but YouTube is very specific with what you're doing. So it's like, if you're talking about 10 different topics, like YouTube's trying to figure out, okay, what does this channel do? And so as far as I'm not saying I know how the algorithm works, I don't, but I do know that if you're too scattered, that it just doesn't know where to put you, and how to kind of brand you, I guess. And so that's why it's like just sticking hard to sports cards for my main channel, and then all the other things can go on that one.
That's smart. Well,
we'll see.
We'll make sure that we link, like, not that there's anyone who follows us and doesn't also follow you, but we will link all of your stuff in the show notes so everybody can follow you. We really, like, genuinely appreciate you jumping back on here after the craziness of the last one.
I feel lucky. I got part 1 and part 2. I got 2 hours with you guys. No,
you did. You were like, we haven't done a part 1 and part 2 back to back like that.
That's a first.
Yeah.
That is a first. Move over, Nat.
Yeah. I've been watching you guys for a while, so I was really happy, to connect with you. And then, of course, we have the Stranger Things commonality. Is like, man, I gotta hang out with these guys at some point.
I'm excited. Are you going to National?
Yeah. My wife and I will be there. So yeah, it'll be good. She's
I get to meet Sports Card Mom.
Yeah, Sports Card Mom. She's awesome. She's great. I mean, she's not a card person, but she's been just, so supportive of all the, the crazy, just doing videos and all the stuff. So she really she came to Chicago 2 years ago. She was kind of like, oh my God, what the hell are we doing? And then once she went to that show, she was like, oh, wow, like this is really cool. The camaraderie that is here,
Yeah.
I was talking to a lot of people coming up and introducing themselves. They gave me like Saints cards because I'm a New Orleans Saints fan, and she was just blown away by it. So it is good.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to meeting her, and hopefully we can link up in real life and not just, via the interwebs. Yeah. And so thank you for joining us again. We appreciate you. And until next time, bye everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys.